I read this week that an ex-US Federal Reserve Vice Chair thought that there was a 50 to 60% chance of recession in the US this year. As storm clouds gather, there seems to be a growing chorus from economists and financial experts saying we are heading towards a recession. Sunil, first of all, I thought it would be good to sort of get back to basics. Can you actually define what is meant by a recession?
The way people normally define it is 2 quarters where GDP or economic activity gets smaller rather than the usual growth pattern. Personally, I think you don't want to be too technical about this. You just want to be thinking if you sustain a contraction in that economic activity in real terms for more than a quarter, then it's not great news.
Okay, that's a good answer, a quick answer to that. I thought, so if we think about things objectively, let's kind of dig into this a bit. What are the current reasons for a recession at the moment?
Well, I guess one of the things that concerns people is that there are different reasons to be found in different places. So close to home, if you think about Europe and the UK, we've seen a sharply rising cost of living, not just through energy, but also through food prices. The war in Ukraine hasn't helped. And I think some concerns that a large segment of the population is going to have to make some very difficult spending choices. But it's different in different places. If you go around the world to Asia and to China, they're still engaged in their zero COVID policy. You're still seeing lockdowns in major cities like Shanghai and Beijing, and really steep slowdowns in economic activity. But even in the US, which has typically been the leader and the strongest engine in terms of growth, we've started to see a few rate rises come through, and investors seeing that, for example, the housing market is slowing in the United States and just wondering how far that can go. So it's those different concerns in different places that are leading people to wonder if they should start putting the pieces together.
Okay, different concerns in different places, but lots of headwinds out there. If we switch this over, maybe something people haven't thought about probably is what are the sort of reasons against a recession happening?
Well, I think if you, again, take those challenges in turn, in Europe, I think one thing that should give a degree of comfort is that companies haven't overextended themselves. I mean, let's face it, we've just come out of the pandemic when it was really a question of battening down the hatches. And as a result, I think even if we see a slowdown and even a period of negative growth, it's not obvious that that would lead to a large number of layoffs and a real weakening of the labor market. That's when you really start to get concerned. As far as China's concerned, I mean, certainly, if you like, this is a policy-induced slowdown. And I think it's very clear that policymakers are seeing the need to dust off more and more stimulus measures to try and compensate, not just in terms of interest rate policy, but also in terms of outright fiscal spending. And then in the United States, the reality is a housing market is slowing, but probably only to levels that were common back in the 2010s. Which was a fairly solid housing market. And actually, if you look at other measures like services confidence or household spending, these are actually still looking pretty solid, pretty resilient.
Okay, so my on-the-spot question for you, as the largest market, US, recession, yes or no this year?
You have to force me for a one-word answer. It's no, but the caveat, as always, is that there's about a 10% chance of a recession coming along in the US when you don't expect it. So don't forget about that 10%. But on balance, I think the US looks to be in reasonable shape.
Okay, so for you, what does this mean for assets? How do you weather these uncertainties within a multi-asset fund?
Well, the interesting thing is normally when you think growth, slowdown, recession risk, you're thinking challenges to company earnings and avoid the stock market. But actually, we are finding quite a few areas that we want to own and that we think represent good value. And really, it's about trying to find resilient earnings at a reasonable price. And we've talked about some of these themes before. On the more defensive side, where you're not so sensitive to the economy, we've talked about the US healthcare sector before as seeing quite a lot of innovation acceleration compared to maybe the last couple of decades. But then equally within those more economically sensitive sectors, sometimes the expectations of investors have just gone a little bit too cautious. So in Europe, the energy sector and the banking sector are probably areas where valuations and the sort of running yields that they're offering in terms of dividends and income still, I think, quite reasonable in the context of some of the downside risks that they face and leaving us feeling that you are getting compensated for those risks.
Okay, Sunil, there are so many things going on at the moment, lots to think about. I think it's no wonder we're seeing sort of markets bouncing around at the moment. Sunil, thank you so much for your time, and we will be back again next week to talk about a topic that's caught our eye.